Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live. And we're coming from Jersey, the Isle of Jersey in the middle of the English Channel with Andy Truscott. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure for me to meet you, talk to you. I mean, you've done some incredible, unprecedented swims, and you've done a lot. But I really want to focus on those swims that you were a pioneer. Can you explain what those were?
Yeah, I've done three so far. I started my career back in 2001. My first solo. I actually did a relay around Jersey in '99. So it spans over quite a few years. And from there, I've built up and up and up and up. I've done obviously the channel, and then I've looked to try and push my body as well um, as I've got older, I've revalued what I do in swimming terms because over here, you've got obviously so many different swims available to you. But I, when I first came back, because I swam solo in 2001, and then I took a period away from swimming, and then I kind of fell back into it in 2014 and 2015. But I went back into the pool and did World Masters swimming in Canada. But I soon realised that the the level of fitness for pool swimming is somewhat slightly different to being able to swim the channel. And I wasn't as young or as fit as I used to be. So I realigned myself with open water swimming and basically fell back in love with it. And when I first came back onto the scene in 2015 and 16, everyone swims for different reasons. And I was swimming to um, I just recently gone through a divorce. It was quite a messy breakup, and then my dad had terminal leukemia, so I turned back to swimming for a way out. So I was chasing records back then. That's what my focus was, and it wasn't until I broke the Jersey to France record um, in I think it was 2016, and literally I had it taken away from me within 24 hours.
Oh,
I it was it was it's a peculiar story. I did the swim with Lionheart, and we went over and we broke the record, and then I had a text saying
oh,
that
just to set the record for everybody. So you went from the Isle of Jersey to the French shore, correct?
correct, yeah,
Correct.
it's
Correct. And
it's it's about it's about 19 miles.
okay. And
So
what time did you start? What was your final official time?
From memory, I think we started. It was about when I broke the record. We started about 11 o'clock in the
At
morning.
morning. Okay.
In the
Okay.
morning, and it was part of. I had challenged somebody in Jersey as part of a charity to raise money for the local hospice where my dad was.
Okay.
We came up with a challenge because this other chap was big into fundraising, and he wasn't a swimmer. So we kind of came up with the idea that we would go run. And if you look at pictures, I'm not built for running. Period. Um, I'm more of a nice channel swimmer,
Mm.
not a runner. So we had put our heads together and we went, right, okay, we'll run from the middle of Jersey
Really? Okay.
to St Catherine's,
Uh-huh.
which which was it's it's just short of, I would say, I want to say it was about 10 miles,
Okay.
just short of 10 miles, and it took me the best part of 3 hours,
Okay.
because I'm not a quick runner,
Uh-huh.
and it was literally 3 hours worth of running, and that was a hard slog. And then we said to ourselves, well, okay, well if we go run there, let's extend it and let's swim across to France.
Okay.
And then we both had our own crew over in France,
Uh-huh.
and we decided from Port By, where we land all the Jersey to France swims, we'd cycle down to the Arc de Triomphe. So we were basing it off the Arch to Arc.
Yes,
So
yes.
we built our own little mini arc in the
Got
middle of
it. Got it.
Jersey,
Okay.
and we ran. And he was a runner, but he wasn't a swimmer. And I knew he was a cyclist. So we said, right, we'll do the same run route and the same swim route, and then the bike route is down to you. We know where to finish. You pick your own course to get there. And the cycle was about 320K.
Wow. Okay.
So it wasn't a small cycle. It's a
Right.
hefty cycle. So we went across, and he, as I mentioned, he wasn't a swimmer. So he wanted to wear a wetsuit. He didn't do it by the traditional rules, as you would.
Right.
So we worked out that over 19 miles, him wearing a wetsuit compared to me wearing my speedos, he would have an advantage roughly of about an hour.
Okay.
So he agreed. Once he got to the swim, if he decided to wear his wetsuit, he was going to take an hour penalty.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I was like, okay, that's fine, that's not a problem. So the run, he got down there before me, and I think it was something like 36 minutes. He was
Before
ahead
you.
of me
Okay. Okay.
after he took the hour penalty.
Okay.
So I was 36 minutes behind him, but he had already taken his penalty.
Yeah.
But it played into my hands because I was a swimmer, he wasn't.
Yeah.
And a traditional Jersey to France swim, you're looking at about 7 to 9 hours. So I thought to myself, well, if he goes close to 9 hours, the year before I had done Jersey to France and I did it in 7.5 hours.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I can get an hour and a half on him. He's already got half an hour on me, so that gives me an hour going into the cycle.
Right.
So I was thinking, well, I'm happy with that. That's not a problem. So we did this run, and it completely took it out of me. So we got to St. Catherine's, where we had timed it like the Arch to Arc, that you've got a bit of time before the swim. So we had about an hour's downtime. So I was knackered. So I went straight into the cafe, and he can believe his eyes. I went straight in the cafe. We had burgers and chips, we had Coke and a donut. And everyone was just sitting there watching me just eat and eat and eat. And I was like, you know what? I'm hungry. I'm having it. I don't
Yeah.
care. It's a long swim. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it happily the way I
Right.
want to do it.
Right.
So then we went to the swim, and I had I use the same crew year in, year out, every swim. So I went, you know what? I'm fed, I'm happy, and I'm warmed up.
Yeah.
I ran 10 miles. It's the first time I started a swim
Okay.
fully warmed up.
Got it.
So I was like, you know what? Let's just go with this. Let's
Yeah.
go head down, sprint from the beginning.
Yeah. Wow.
And 6.5 hours later, I was walking up the beach.
Wow.
And it was literally we had broken the record by about a minute and a half.
Okay.
So it was like in the middle of this, I just ran 10 miles. I'd eaten a burger, chips, Coke, donut, and then I pull out this fantastic swim
Wow.
that everyone was just like, wow. Like that.
I think you found the secret. Run 10 miles, have a donut, swim.
Exactly. And so then I got on the bike and I went, right, I'm going to put mileage on the bike before he gets off. I'll put mileage on the bike, get up the road and have a sleep. So then we just went on it and on it and on. So our team chose a course for me, and they chose, it was 10.5K shorter than his course.
Okay.
But his was completely flat.
Got it.
And mine had a massive 20-minute hill climb in the middle of it.
Okay.
But it's a shorter distance.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, we could put up with a 20-minute hill climb to have the short. Well, that is, it's hard going, but coming down, my speedo coming down was hitting 68K coming down the back of the hill. Because again,
Right.
you put a 17, 18 stone bloke on a bike and you push him down a hill and he doesn't touch the brakes, down it goes. So we did that, and I didn't know. I was guided all the way into Paris, got to the Arc de Triomphe, and we had a local IT Guru
Uh,
Sports Hub doing it, and they had this fantastic website where I had a tracker and he had a tracker, and you could physically watch us both coming in from different angles into Paris. And it took us 33 and a half hours of racing, and I beat him by about 30 seconds.
no way.
It
Whoa,
was
wow.
it's fantastic, but it had everybody on the edge of their seats watching it, because he came up this way and I came down, and as we were getting into Paris, it was head to head, and everyone, the Facebook just went mad. There's text, go on, go on, and
Wow.
I didn't know any of the laws over there or anything. So there's me by the Arch of Triumph. You got that big roundabout, haven't you?
Yeah,
That's like 8 lanes,
yeah.
and I stopped just before it, and I couldn't see him. I was like, I don't know where he is, and I couldn't work out how to work this 8 lane roundabout
Yeah.
to get it. So I went, you know what? I'm just gonna put my head down and just go
No
straight to
way.
Detroit. So I went straight through and bunny hopped the pavement onto the Arc de Triomphe. And the next thing I knew, I had a whole load of police on me. You're not allowed to bike here. You're not allowed to bike here. Get off, get off, get off. And they were literally pushing me back into the road where all these cars were whizzing around. But it was crazy. So I did that and I broke the record. And then I came home, and Matt, my pilot, texts me saying, we've got a swimmer who wants to swim, who's in Geneva. And it was Max Bear.
Mhm.
Um, but he's in Geneva on business. He doesn't have any kit with him, but he could get a direct flight to Jersey and swim. Will you crew for him? So I was like, yeah, fine, no problem. I'll crew for him. I'm a big believer of giving out as much as you can as taking. So
Right.
I was like, yeah, no worries. I'll come on the boat, not a problem. And then he texted me back saying, great. Can you also give him some goggles, hat, and costume? Because he hasn't got any kit. So I was like, okay. I says, I'll make up all my feeds, my drinks. I'll bring a costume. I'll bring a hat, bring a goggle. So he literally wore my whole kit. And I went on the boat. I was a one-man crew for him, and he started off and he went out like the clappers as well. And it was Matt's got on his computer on his boat, he's got the quarters of everybody else that had gone before.
Okay.
And it was literally head to head on his chart, me where I was literally the day before, and it was going all the way up like that. So it ended up that I ended up encouraging Max, who was wearing my own kit. I was his one man crew to beat my record, and he literally walked up the beach and he beat me by a minute.
No way.
So
That
it's like, so there was there's a bit of a laughter for a couple of years. Obviously, it's something to do with my speedos. So
right.
everyone was after wearing my speedos, but it's it is what it is. If I could do a swim, and if I break a record and it encourages somebody else to get out there and do it, then that's all good to me. That's fair play. But then it slowly got me thinking over time, as I'm getting older, you've got to be super fit to break these speed records. So that's when my mind started to move away from going after time records,
Got it.
because it taught me a valuable lesson that records are great. Not everybody wants to go for them, but it encourages me to swim. But records are there to be broken. And it got me thinking, no one can ever take away
Yeah.
a first.
Yeah.
You could take a record away, but you can't take a world first away. So I
Right.
thought, okay, locally, what swims can I do? So I looked at Minquies to Jersey first, which is about 14 miles south of Jersey. It's between Jersey and St. Malo.
Okay.
So we went over there, and I tried it in 2016. It was a big year in 2016 for me. I did about 6 channel swims.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I'd done it earlier in the year with a long-term swimming friend of mine, Ali, and we did a two-man relay, um, to try it out the route, and that was quite tough, an hour in, hour out for 7 hours.
Yeah.
Um, and then I revisited it later in the season and did it solo, and became the first person to do it, which was a tough a tough swim because the tide runs differently to the way you're swimming.
Got it.
But it was a fun. It's a fun little swim,
Yeah.
and I don't say that lightly. Obviously, 14 miles isn't
Right.
small, but a 7 hour swim is better than an 18-hour swim
Right.
in
Right.
some cases. So I did that, and then I started to think, well, okay, I quite like doing world first. It's nice. You're breaking barriers and you're pushing it. So I thought, right, okay, where can I push it from there? So I went, okay, well, I'm going to go for the Jersey to France and back because a lot of people from Jersey are doing Jersey to France around jerseys, but nobody had ever tried Jersey to France and back. So I booked it with Matt, and Matt was like, "Yeah, you're the first person to book it with me," because Matt's only been on the scene now for nine years
Okay.
with Lionheart.
Yeah.
A lot of the swims before that was done purely through the long distance swimming club boat. So I went with Matt and we did Jersey to France. And I have to say to date, that is probably up there with the toughest swim I've ever done.
Really? Okay.
I had a lot going on in my life at the time. My mind wasn't in the swim. I hadn't done much training. Um, but I paid quite a bit to do the swim. So I started it and I couldn't get into the groove. Um, I find when I swim, it goes into a meditative state quite easily,
Mhm.
and I just get into the flow. Now the Jersey to France, I just could not do. I
Not
couldn't
from the
switch.
get-go.
Yeah,
Not at all. Okay.
it was tough. I had so much going around in my mind, I couldn't switch off. So I was constantly thinking. It was a struggle. I was out of fitness, and it was just not happening. So I was like, I'm going to power on through, and I'm literally just going to take it hour by hour by hour, and swim to the feed, swim to the feed. So we managed to get further up because we were doing a circle
Uh-huh.
effectively. We had to land higher up in France and then come round because between Jersey and France, you've got another group of islands, which is called the Equios.
Okay.
So you can't go through the Equios on a low tide. So we had to go round it. So
Okay.
Matt had plotted all that. So we did it about 7 hours. I walked up underneath a lighthouse just in France on the beach, and I thought to myself, it's a struggle this swim. I'm not even going to hang around on the beach. I literally cleared the water, turned around, ran straight back in, and started swimming. And the crew were like, "Do you want to have a break?" I was like, "Let's get an hour out the way, and then we'll stop. We'll re-grease in the water. We'll have a proper feed in the water. We'll go from there." And it was nice coming back when the sun was going down. We had a couple of dolphins swim alongside us, which kind of poked it up. But again, it was a struggle. And then towards the end, the fog came down massively,
Oh.
and we were literally about half an hour from finishing, and the fog just went vump.
Oh.
And where we wanted to land, Matt couldn't land safely. So he was like, "Well, we've got a choice. We either pull the swimmer out and call it, or we try and find a safer place." So I was like, "Well, I've struggled for 15 hours to get here.
Yeah.
I'm not going. I really don't want you to call it with half an hour swimming left."
Right.
So we ended up coming all the way back down to St Catherine's, on the east coast, the bottom east coast corner, and I spent 20 minutes fighting the current against me,
Oh.
which after 16 hours of swimming, I was just going nowhere. And then he goes, "Right, I want 2 minutes hard sprint out of you. And then what we're going to do is we're both going to turn around quickly and use the tide to come back
Okay.
and swim at an angle to try and land on the beach that we started at." And so we put our head down, sprinted, and then suddenly turned round and legged it back. And we just managed to cut
Oh,
across the tide and get on the beach where we landed. So we literally did a full circle in 16 and a half hours.
wow.
But it was a struggle. It
Yeah.
was a real big struggle, that swim. And then from there, I went, well, okay, now I've done that's the biggest swim to date for me, 16 hours, well, 16 and a half hours. So I was like, okay, if I can do that at my worst, let's see what else I can do. And then the year later, it'd always been at the back of my mind a double round jersey. And I know that there's
Oh, wait. So let's look at that. Always been the back of my mind to do a double round jersey. That isn't like normal. That's extraordinary. I mean, when you went around the first time, were you thinking, I could do this again? I mean, what was a catalyst to that thought?
I think I think it was 2017 I did a solo, and I was like, you know what? No, it was 2018 I went straight into it, didn't I? It was 2019 that I did the second solo. So 2018 I did all these big swims.
Yeah.
So I went Minky's Jersey to France, Jersey to France and back, the Channel, and 2017, 16, I did quite a lot of swims, and I built up the hours and hours and hours. So I thought to myself, you know what, I want to give a double round jersey, and it was kind of Sally that gave the push. Although I didn't speak to her about it, she did previously the 2 round jerseys in 4 days over the weekend
Okay. As a training for her double crossing.
as a training for a double crossing. And I looked at it, and I'd always wanted to push myself to the extreme and thought, could somebody do a double jersey? And there's a few other swims in the back of my mind as well that I want to conquer in the next few years. So I thought, I kept niggling away. So I contacted Matt and said, can a double round jersey be done? And he looked at the charts and he said, the problem with doing it is when you finish the first one, you've got to finish the first one at a certain time frame to catch the tide to go again.
Yeah.
So he said, if anyone's going to try it, and anyone who is mad or stupid enough to want to give it a go, it's going to be you. So I said, okay, give me a price. And we set it up and we went, okay, let's give it a go. So we went round in 2018. We did first lap in 10 hours 39.
Okay.
So
Was that about the time you were targeting that first leg?
we had looked at it and we thought we could get round. A normal round jersey is between 10 and 12 hours.
Okay.
Well, 10. The record at the moment is by Ross. He does it at 9.5, and the slowest person at the moment is about 12 hours.
Okay.
So it's in between there. So
Yeah.
we set off later at the beginning, knowing that we would have to work hard
On the second
to
half.
get the tide. So it was literally the first lap. We had done an hour's swimming, and he said, you know what, you're going to have to sprint for the next hour because I'm not even sure you're going to make the tide to complete the first lap. So I was like, okay, so I'm potentially swimming for 24 hours. An hour 2, you've already got me sprinting. I says, this isn't going to end well at all. So we put our head down. We managed to catch the tide just, and then it was nice swimming all the way around. It was comfortable. So we finished in 10 hours 39. Now, my first solo round jersey in 2001, I did 10 hours 37.
Okay.
So you were talking 16 years later, I was two minutes slower. So it just shows that with age, it doesn't affect you. So then we touched the wall, and then we went round again. And the second lap was, I knew I had 16 hours into me, and 16 hours took me up the north coast, which was about a third of the way round a lap. So we knew that was coming. And then the lights came down, the sun went down, and it's there's no lights around, so it's like being in the middle of the channel again. It's just me and the boat, and it was comfortable. And because I had built up to it, previous time I did the Jersey Arch to Arc race. I did Minkies to Jersey, Jersey to France again, Jersey to France and back. I had a lot of hours in me, and I was quite fit. I was the fittest I'd been for years, and we managed to get back round in 11 and a half hours. So it was 22 hours and 7 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was good, and I felt comfortable, and I touched the wall, and I was completely physically fine. I got out, got on the boat,
Okay.
put my stuff on, and somebody made the comment that it was like I had just done one lap around Jersey,
Yeah.
because I was the fittest I'd been for a while,
Yeah.
and it immediately niggled to me that, you know, I was kind of feeling okay, and somebody made the comment saying, well, I look forward to 3 laps next year, and it niggled with me. And I was like, okay. And Matt just looked at me, the pilot, and I looked at Matt and smiled. He goes, no. So I went away, and I was contacted by this chap called John, who's now my friend.
Let's go back to that first pioneering double around Jersey. Psychologically, throughout the swim, you had confidence. Other than that first hour where you had to speed up, everything went to plan.
I was in the fittest shape of my life. Mentally, I was in a cracking place, and I went there. I woke up in the morning. I put my earphones straight in. I've got a bit of a routine. I wouldn't say I'm superstitious, but I've got myself in a bit of a routine where I listen to a certain soundtrack that hasn't got words, because the last thing I want to do is swim around Jersey with like the Barbie girl or something in my head. So I listen to a nice soundtrack with no words, so it clears my mind out. And I got down to the boat. It was a lovely sunny morning, and it was like I knew I was there to do business. And it was like the business end of things. It was a different build up. I had trained solidly for it, and it was like, right, we're here to do business. And it's, whilst Minkies to Jersey was a pioneering swim at 14 miles, it seemed to me that a double round Jersey, lesser people will try to do a double round Jersey than they would a 14-mile swim.
Right.
So I was like, well, there's only a handful of crazy swimmers in the world who can do such a long distance.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I wanted to put myself on the world stage.
Got it.
And I was there to do that. I was there to take me. I've gone from being a local Jersey swimmer who does open water to I want to be on the world stage of open water swimming.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's going to take me.
All right. So now you have the number 3 in your mind. So now what happens?
I got out, and I met this chap John, who wanted to cover my swim, and he was big into mental attitude and all that, and he was writing about it. So he wanted to contact me to talk about how somebody can just build up to such a big swim. So I sat with him and spoke to him, and I said to him at the time, I got a niggle because I did 2 laps. I felt great. I felt I could have carried on. Whether I could have completed the 3rd lap was another question, but I could have certainly have left the wall and done at least another hour. So, and then from there, the momentum started to build up. The more I started to talk to people, the more it was like, well, where you go after 2 laps, you know, can you go back to doing 1 lap? Once you've done 2 laps, can you do 1 lap? So I was like, well, I says, ideally, I'd like to do 3. And then it built up, and then I text Matt and said, look, how about 3? Do we give it a go? He came back saying, why not? Here's the price. Why not? What's stopping you? So I was like, okay, fine. So then the build up was different. I think there's new things in my life. I had a new partner. I had changed jobs. I dealt with the loss of my father and everything else, and the build up was completely different. And I hadn't trained as hard. And the honest answer is that I'd stuck 10 kilograms on as well. So I was the biggest I've ever been in my life, and I got in and I started to swim, and the first feed after an hour didn't stay down,
Okay.
and then every feed on that first lap came back up.
Oh.
And I think it's a mixture of, for some reason, I tend to turn my back to the boat crew when I feed. And I can hear him. So I was vomiting it up. They could hear me vomiting, but they weren't sure I was, and I wasn't communicating that to them. So as we were going further and further along the swim, I was exercising more and more and more, but not taking any fluids in.
Yeah.
So I was exhausted and spent after the first lap. So then I was like, well, I want to get out now. I'm done. And then they kind of had a quiet word with me and said, look, let's go again. You've done it before. So I went, okay, fine. So I put my head down. We literally hobbled around on the second lap, and we got to Corbière, and Corbière is on the southwest corner, and you've literally got about 2.5 hours left of a lap of swimming. And by that time it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was physically exhausted.
Yeah.
And I was like, even if I can limp to the end of 2, I know I can't finish a third.
Yeah.
I said, so there's no point even starting the third. And we sat at Corbière for the best part of half an hour. And the crew, I asked them for a couple of minutes to think about it, and the crew were fantastic. They sat on the boat, they watched me, and I sat there. I didn't swim, I didn't move, and we must have sat there. Well, it felt like we sat there for about 20 minutes, because it was a tough choice, because it was, I'm too knackered to continue, but then I'm going to lose that third lap.
Yeah.
And I paid for it, and it's a lot of money, and it's in your head. You're thinking, I've paid all this money in one hand for a swim, and I'm calling the swim myself, which is different to somebody else calling it.
Right.
It's like you've got to call it yourself, but you're fighting within yourself to call a swim or not to call it.
Yeah.
And after about 20 minutes of thinking about it, I went, you know what, I can't do it. I'm coming out at the end of this lap. Let's finish the lap, and then I'm coming out. So we hobbled to the finish, and then I got back on the boat, and it turned out that the 2 laps I did was 20 minutes slower
Oh,
than
wow.
the year before.
Wow.
So it wasn't that different in timings,
Yeah.
and the lap versus lap on each one wasn't that different. Just the feeling in my body, the fact I couldn't take any fluids on, was just it. I was exhausted and spent. So I got on the boat, I sat down, and I fell asleep like that. And then my other half picked me up. I came home and passed out, and we ended up taking me into hospital, where I ended up having 4 drips in me,
Oh, wow.
and I spent 7 days in hospital with drips on.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was, the doctors were surprised at how I was still there, considering all the test results came back saying that I was rough.
Wow.
And they were like, if you'd carried on, you know, no one knows where I would be now. But it was a completely different feeling.
Well, incredible. I think we end part 1 here, and we're going to carry on part 2 in a few moments.
I'm just going to put the light on.